The following Degrassi video contains discussions on topics that should not be viewed by normal viewers. These topics are sad and vulnerable and disgusting in lots of people's minds. And the best way to deal with it is by talking about it with somebody. So viewer discretion is strongly advised. Hey there, hello there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Degrassi video. I wasn't sure if I wanted to set up like a poll, like a top 10 or something like that. But I decided against this. Now I'm going to talk about the biggest Degrassi saddest storylines around. And I'm not going to rank them because ranking them will not do it the justice. I know I did a video talking about the most shocking moments or sad storylines in Degrassi history, but I figure I'm gonna just do it in one whole video and try my best to, cut it down to 1 minute per thing, or as best as I can. All right. So, yeah, in no particular order, here we go. One of the saddest storylines in Degrassi Junior High, I guess I'll say like saddest storyline per year, I guess, unless I don't have one specifically. So Degrassi Junior High, I think the saddest storyline was Wheels by a long shot, losing his adoptive parents. We learned in season 1 that Wheels doesn't live with his birth parents. He lives with his adoptive parents because his real parents gave him up and all that. But his adoptive parents were not really happy with him being with Joey and getting into all these messes. Snake they were okay with. But Wheels unfortunately decides one day to get out of a movie date with his parents and play with Joey for the sits. And then he comes home and finds police cars in front of his house. He's thinking the police were called by his parents. However, his grandmother comes out of the car and tells Wheels that his parents died by a drunk driver and all that. And, it was just terrible. And Wheels went through the emotions of like losing his parents and all that. It was just so sad and all that. Raditch, the twins, Heather and Erica, Spike, Snake, Joey, a lot of people came for the visitation and were trying to help Wheels out. Wheels is upset by everything. He lashes out at Joey saying, I should have been at that movie date with the parents instead of being with you. Why? And Joey says, you could have died too. Wheels unfortunately goes off the deep end, if you will, and like self-loathes and just basically he tries to cope with his parents' death, but he can't, and he gets into a lot of problems with his grandmother who's willing to help him out and all that. And he gets kicked out of the house, and then he steals money from Joey's mom, and then he sleeps on Snake's porch and all that. Snake is not too pleased with Wheels. And then Wheels, by Degrassi High, turns into this drunken guy who likes drinking and all that. And then, unfortunately, while he's drunk, he drives Lucy to get chips, and then he crashes into another person's car and kills a 2-year-old. He says that the 2-year-old should have been wearing a seatbelt, but, Wheels took a lot of heat for it, and he took a 9-year jail sentence. Snake says it was not enough. Snake, of course, does not like Wheels and doesn't want anything to do with Wheels. Wheels goes back in the first episode of Degrassi Junior High. At first, Americans couldn't see it unless it was a deleted scene, and Canadians got to see it. When Wheels tells Lucy how sorry he was for the driving incident that caused Lucy to go blind for a little bit, and Lucy had problems, and Wheels says he's been beating himself up over it. And Lucy forgives him. And then in season 3, when Snake has leukemia, I guess we could kind of say it's the saddest moment from season 3. But Wheels is recruited by Joey to cheer Snake up, even though Snake doesn't want to deal with Wheels, and Wheels basically cheers Snake up. In Degrassi High, the saddest storyline has to be Chloe Tanner's suicide. The fact of the matter is that Claude was not a popular character in Degrassi High. He was eyed by Caitlin as probably a good boyfriend because they both care about the environment and like movies. Unfortunately, Claude shows his true colors by him and Caitlin trying to deface a nuclear place, a place that helps with nuclear weapons and all that. Unfortunately, though, Caitlin gets caught by the security guard, and Chloe just basically runs off, leaving Caitlin high and dry. I mean, why was Caitlin wearing all that gaudy jewelry and all the big shoes and all that? She was going to get caught on the fence and all that. Of course, Claude shows his true colors by refusing to come to the courtroom because he knows that his parents will not allow that to happen, and he doesn't want to get in trouble, and knows that the security guard knows who he is. So he basically leaves Caitlin high and dry. Caitlin has to deal with community service and all that. I just wish that Caitlin had basically told Claude off and, got Claude in trouble and all that because, Claude was just as bad. And then Claude loses Caitlin, and then all of a sudden Claude is upset that Caitlin doesn't give him the time of day. So he decides, after having some issues and all that, and being told he can't do his macabre poem in the showcase for the high school, he basically decides enough is enough. He takes a gun, and he does what he does. Now, of course, at first you couldn't really hear it, but sound technology, like 10 years ago, caught the gunshot and all that. You could hear it when they're talking about things in Mr. Colby's class, like Macbeth. Snake has to go to the bathroom and then finds Claude's body and basically heaves. And then he basically tells Radich about it. Radich is the vice principal in Degrassi High, not principal as people think. And unfortunately, and Radich takes the Snake seriously, and what happened. And, Snake had PTSD dealing with the body. Joey was willing to help him out. There was a massive discussion about what Claude did. Was it a good thing or a bad thing? Joanne basically kicks herself for not helping Claude enough, and Radich basically tells her that you did all you could. What more can you have done? And then Radich makes a poignant speech about how we are overwhelmed, but once we kill ourselves, everything is over and you can't come back from it. Lucy makes the point that maybe Claude killed himself on purpose to make the school feel bad for shaming him and all that. So, of course, they were going to postpone the showcase, but Spike comes up with a great idea. Says that we can do this as a benefit for suicidal teens and all that. Put the show on, but also come to light about teens and suicide. And basically everyone is like, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And they like the idea. Of course, Claude gets into Caitlin's head by giving her flowers and all that, and Caitlin has nightmares about him. Joey snaps her out of it, basically saying, this is what he wants. He wants you to feel bad about his death. So Caitlin is basically told, don't give him the time of day. Okay, season 1 of Degrassi, the saddest storyline was, I can't really say a saddest. Well, I guess it's a sad storyline, is when Emma got catfished. Emma feels like she has a boy named Jordan on her, and, on her radar, and she goes to the hotel to meet him. But unfortunately, he's a middle-aged man, and practically she gets got. Fortunately for her, Manny, JT, and Toby team up to find where Emma is and tell Snake and Spike, and they confront this Jordan guy. Emma's basically told that you can come to me for everything by Spike, but we all know Emma doesn't. And it actually does explain Emma's prudishness in the whole Manny cheerleading thing, because she's worried that Manny will be taken advantage of as a cheerleader. And also her problems with Liberty being comforted by Mr. Armstrong. She feels that Liberty is being taken advantage of. Emma doesn't tip her hand at that, saying that she was worried about them. She just lets them get nasty at her. Season 2's saddest storyline has to be Craig in his life. In the season premiere, when Doves Cry, he's taking photos of Angie and Emma, and it's like, why? Craig, unfortunately, his home life sucks. His dad basically beats him up for no good reason and all that. Craig is suffering. He takes money that his dad gives him for breaking his camera and wants to take Angie to BC. Joey, of course, wants Craig to stay away from Angie, fair enough. But then the picture comes through as Craig plays chicken with a train. Sean stops him. But practically, it was just upsetting. And, Joey finds out that Craig's dad is the problem. And, Angie pipes up. Craig then goes to his mom's grave. And we find out that it was Julia, who surprisingly was Joey's wife that he was grieving over at the start of Degrassi Junior, Next Gen season, the first episode. It all makes sense. Julia left Craig and Albert, Craig's dad, behind, and then went to be with Joey. And Albert, I think, used Craig as an emotional punching bag because he's like, why did Julia leave me? And then he's alone with Craig and goes after Craig, I think, trying to get his anger out over Julia leaving him. Craig lives with Joey for a while, then Albert, after claiming he's changed his spots, gets him back, but he didn't. So anyway, Craig is upset, and then more upset because his dad just died in a car accident. Probably he was too mad about the whole situation and then crashed the car without realizing it. Probably not on purpose. Craig comes back to school even though the Raj tells him that he's under no obligation to come back to school and all that. He understands because, the wheel situation. But the fact of the matter is that, Craig is trying to process his dad's death. He should be happy his tormentor's gone, but he's sad. After hallucinating his dad was around when he won Luau King and Queen alongside Ashley, he tears stuff up. Radish tells the students, don't get involved with Craig. Let him get him out of his system. And so he does. And Terry does the right thing and tells Craig she knows how he feels about losing a parent because Terry's mom died while Terry was at a birthday party. So fortunately, Craig calms down and all that. Season 3, the saddest storyline has to be Spike with his leukemia. Snake, why am I saying Spike? Sorry, Snake with leukemia. Snake seemed fine, and then for some reason he's starting to slow down and just doesn't feel right. And then I think it was episode 5 or 6 in season 3 that saw him be diagnosed with leukemia, and Emma worries about it. Snake worries about it too, but thankfully Emma and Spike come up with a way for Snake to cheer up by going bowling with Wheels and Joey. Fortunately, though, Wheels and Snake bury the hatchet, and Snake's happy and all that. Fortunately for Snake, his leukemia is in remission. It's not mentioned at any more time, but that's the way it is. Season 4 storyline, sad storyline. I don't have to tell you. You kind of guess. Has to be the whole Terry situation. I know you could say season 3 should have been Terry's situation, but season 4 was the continuation and the accumulation of everything. So season 3, Terry meets Rick, who's her admirer, but Rick is emotionally and physically abusive. Unfortunately, Terry brings Rick on the road trip with Paige, Spinner, Jimmy, and Hazel. Paige insults Rick. Rick blasts at Terry saying, you shouldn't be with her. And then Terry says, that's just Paige being Paige. And that makes it okay. Like, I understand his anger because he's thinking that Paige is just putting Terry in her shadow. And I understand that. But he pushes Terry. She strikes her head on a rock. She gets better. She's through surgery and all that. A lot of hate. Like, Terry's dad actually got mad at Spinner and Paige for not telling him about Rick's behavior and all that. But then he cools down saying, yeah, I'm sorry. I should not have blasted you like that. Paige and Spinner blame each other and themselves for Rick's situation. Rick comes back to Degrassi seemingly with no strings attached. And the school is upset. And they take their aggression out on Rick. But the fact that Rick is still at Degrassi, no question about it. The Orange Ribbon campaign was basically a sign that it was right to go after Rick, who had a domestic violence thing against Terry. All that. I mean, Raj did a stupid thing by letting Rick back. I know he pretty much had no choice, but it was never clear if Raj actually had second thoughts. I think maybe he did, but the school boards basically did nothing against it. Well, regardless of that, time standstill was huge about Rick taking a gun to school, being calmed down by Paige, but then Spinner and Jay plant things on Jimmy, and then Rick decides to shoot Jimmy. But not forget, Rick didn't point directly at Jimmy. He turned his head and shot. If Jimmy had known that, Jimmy would have ducked out of the way. But then Rick finds Emma conveniently, wants to destroy Emma for stringing him along. Sean kills Rick inadvertently, and lots of blame are passed around. Raj gets a lot of blame thanks to Simpson. People are blaming themselves for not realizing Rick's problems. Simpson blamed himself. But yeah, it just went there. Like the school went through a lot of change. Like Emma especially. I mean, her problems with internalization really hit the fan with the whole Rick situation. Raj was rightfully tossed from Degrassi. He was reassigned. He wasn't fired, or he was fired and he didn't want to say it. But I think the reassignment was good for Raj because it's a way, and I think the school board kind of did that on purpose because they kind of told Raj he had to let Rick back at the school, and if that came out, he was dead duck. They were dead ducks. So that's what happened. And that's what. So yeah, he was gone. Spinner, of course, got rightfully ostracized for what he did, especially with Jimmy. Jay didn't give a shit. Alex should have came clean, but she didn't. She kept internalizing because she knew that she would have to basically turn herself in. She had a guilty conscience, but Jay told her not to do that. Of course, Emma with her problems, Toby with his problems. Lots of people had bad impacts, especially Jimmy. Season 5's saddest storyline was, the pregnancy, Liberty's pregnancy, I would say, because Liberty was basically treated, the writers, the way we look at it in season 5 is she was treated like crap through her pregnancy, and it was basically through JT's eyes and all that. It's understandable because, JT had to step up to the plate as a father. But it just made Liberty look bad, especially after Liberty breaks up with JT after JT's suicide attempt. It was a suicide attempt and all that because, he was in trouble with the drug dealer and he was going to go to jail for stealing Oxycontin. So he wanted to take his own life. Thankfully, Jay stops him, even though Jay was the devil on his shoulder and told him to sell the Oxycontin. It was his fault. Of course, Jay obviously hid everything from everyone. But I feel that, Liberty got shafted and all that. Yeah, Liberty wanted the kid and gave up the kid because JT, you know, didn't do his job. But I mean, Liberty could have taken some responsibility. I know her parents didn't want her to be anywhere near JT and all that, but Liberty has the baby, and then the adopted parents decide to take the baby to Seattle. Liberty has not PTSD, postpartum, but her parents don't give a shit, especially her dad and all that. And thanks to Derek, in his pre-douchey face, they make memory chest. But, and it leads into the season 6 saddest storyline has to be JT Steph. Because Lakers and Degrassi had this massive feud. Nick from Lakers went after Mia because, they used to date, but then Mia, after Nick was impregnated by Lucas, and, Izzy was there. And JT was doting on Izzy, the 2-year-old. And Liberty was jealous. I mean, I understand Liberty's jealous. She had a right to be jealous. But she basically made herself look like the bad guy in the situation. She was very petty and all that. I mean, Liberty chased JT away. Like, Liberty pushed JT away. It was her fault. She didn't want to take responsibility. And JT basically said, now I know why we broke up. It was the right thing to do. But JT decided, oh, I should be with Liberty instead of Mia. I think in the back of his head, he thought maybe I should be with Liberty. Then this stupid rivalry would stop and my friends wouldn't get hurt because Toby got hurt by Lakers. But of course, Johnny DeMarco and Drake Lampley, the redhead, decide to do something. And Drake basically, out of nowhere, stabs JT in the aorta. JT bleeds out and dies. And everyone is saddened. Drake gets caught. Johnny DeMarco had to have been in trouble, but he probably had a plea bargain and basically told on Drake everything. Everyone goes through a lot of problems. Mia accuses Liberty of being an emotionless robot, but, Liberty had to be strong. I get it. And then, Emma got involved in it because, the tragedy of JT false steps from her home. I know she was bad in her afterlife, but it happened steps from her house. She had to freak. And it was a crime scene, and she was going to lose Manny as an ally. She was scared. And, she had PTSD flashbacks of the whole Rick situation. I don't blame Emma one bit, but Emma went too far. Season 7's side storyline was Darcy, obviously being taken advantage of. Darcy and Peter should never have been a couple in the first place. Peter basically cried crocodile tears. That's just my opinion. But basically what ends up happening is that Darcy goes off on a ski weekend with Peter and Manny, and then gets taken advantage of thanks to someone slipping something in her drink. And she doesn't know who her rapist is. And of course, she can't tell anyone because the friendship club would take away her purity ring, and her parents would be on top of her because she's supposed to be a goody goody Christian and all that. And you know, it's not just the fact that oh Darcy got raped. Darcy had sex. You're not supposed to do that. So Darcy goes into self-loathing mode. She decides to take action in the girls' bathroom, but dressing room. But thank God Manny caught her. I'm not going to tell you what she did. It's too gruesome, or she attempted to do, I should say. And then Darcy unfortunately goes off on a tangent and it tells Snake he was inappropriate with her, but two Hatzalackles and her mom. Obviously, Darcy couldn't tell her mom because what happened to her because you know she's supposed to live a Christian lifestyle. Snake unfortunately gets kicked out. Darcy does apologize to Snake and said that she told everyone everything that it didn't happen, but Snake said that they had still had to investigate. But he's not mad at Darcy for any reason. So thankfully, Snake had the empathy. And then Darcy goes to rad camp and then realizes she has to talk to her rapist and all that. So she does. I wanted to leave you on a high note in about 21 minutes. So I'm going to just end it right here and then we'll get through season 8 and onwards next video. Anyway, I'm Jen Diamond. I do.